I'm doing it for myself, and for all the people who, like me, have been underestimated. Rachel smiled, admiring his determination. Then I'll help you. We can study together for the competition. What began as study sessions in the university, library soon transformed into something more. Rachel discovered that, beyond an extraordinary talent for mathematics, Elijah had a unique perspective on the world. His way of seeing problems was different, innovative. While most students followed traditional methods, Elijah found shortcuts, elegant solutions that no one else saw. "How do you do that?" she asked one day, after Elijah solved in minutes a problem that she had been trying to solve for hours. "I see patterns," he explained. "Numbers, shapes, sequences. They speak to me in a way that words can't." Meanwhile, behind the scenes at the university, the competition was taking on the contours of a true spectacle. Dr. Whitaker had spread among the professors that Elijah was a fraud, that his success in class had been luck. Dr. Richards, although she had been publicly corrected, maintained an ambiguous stance. Part of her wanted to see Elijah fail to validate her initial prejudices. Another part, the scientist in her, was genuinely curious about the limits of this apparently extraordinary young man. Professor Thompson, from the physics department, who had been present on the day of the incident in class, had a different view. What if he's really a prodigy? We've heard of cases like this. Mathematical savants are rare, but they exist. "This is ridiculous," Whitaker retorted. "We are talking about a young man with Down syndrome. There are well-documented cognitive limitations." "Science has also been wrong before," Thompson replied, "just as you are now." The tension among the professors only increased when the university's president, Dr. Claire Mendoza, learned of the case. She saw a unique opportunity there, not only scientific but also for institutional marketing. A story of overcoming and inclusion, with NYU at its center, would be gold for the institution's public image. "I want complete coverage of this competition," she instructed the communications department. "If this young man really has an extraordinary gift, I want the world to know that it was here at our university that he was discovered." What nobody knew was that, for Elijah, mathematics had always been a refuge. When words failed, when looks of pity or contempt became unbearable, numbers were this constant reliable. Since he was little, while other children played in the park, he was fascinated with patterns, sequences, geometries. Mrs. Constance noticed this interest early and, even with limited resources, did her best to nurture that passion. On the eve of the competition, Elijah was contemplating New York City from his bedroom window. The lights from the housing projects on the outskirts contrasted with the illuminated buildings of Manhattan, forming an urban mosaic of inequality and beauty. He thought about his journey to get here, the difficulties, the prejudice. He thought about his mother, who sacrificed so much so that he could be at the university. He thought about Rachel, perhaps the first person besides his mother who truly believed in him. "Tomorrow," he murmured to himself, "tomorrow, they'll see." The day of the competition arrived with a clear sky and radiant sun, typical of New York in spring. NYU's main auditorium was packed. Students, professors, and even local journalists filled the space, creating a buzz of expectation. The competition was divided into elimination rounds with progressively more difficult problems. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. Elijah was nervous but determined. Rachel managed to see him before the start and gave him a quick hug. "You've already won just by being here," she whispered. In the first round, the problems were challenging, but Elijah solved them with relative ease. In the second round, while other competitors sweated and hesitated, he continued advancing with confidence. It was in the third and final round that Dr. Richards, one of the judges, decided to raise the stakes. She presented a problem considered almost impossible within the given time limit. Even Professor Thompson, who was among the judges, hesitated when analyzing the question. "This is deliberately cruel," he murmured to his colleague. "No one will be able to solve this in the stipulated time." "Then we'll have our answer about Mr. Martin," she replied with a half-smile. But Elijah remained calm. Instead of getting lost in complexities, he found an alternative path, seeing the solution intuitively. When he finished before time was up, the auditorium was in shock. Dr. Richards couldn't hide her surprise. The judges analyzed his answer. It was correct. Teachers mock a student with Down syndrome at the university, but when he picks up the chalk, everyone is left speechless. The students were preparing for another rigorous advanced calculus class taught by the feared professor Dr. Helen Richards. The atmosphere was tense, not only because of the difficult subject matter, but also because of the presence of visiting professors who would be observing the class to evaluate her methods. Among the students sat Elijah Martin, a young student with Down syndrome who was frequently underestimated by his peers and professors. From day one, Elijah faced looks of doubt and contempt. For many, his presence there was a mistake, a deviation, in an environment where only the intellectually capable should be. The associate professor, Dr. Richard Whitaker, was one of the most skeptical. He made no secret of his opinion that the university should be a space of excellence, not of charity. As he often said in the hallways, the class began with a challenge. A series of complex equations were written on the whiteboard. Dr. Richards conducted the class with absolute confidence, her impeccable posture and firm tone of voice making it clear that no one there would dare question her. But Elijah noticed an error, small but crucial. The solution followed an incorrect path that would compromise the final result. He looked around, but no other student noticed. No one dared to question Dr. Richards. Elijah took a deep breath and raised his hand. The silence in the room was immediate. The professor arched her eyebrow as if she already knew the answer before Elijah even spoke. "There's an error in the transformation, Professor," he said with a firm voice despite the nervousness he felt inside. The room exploded in whispers. Whitaker smiled, expecting the imminent humiliation. Dr. Richards, instead of immediately rebutting, looked fixedly at Elijah before challenging, "Are you sure, Mr. Martin?" Without hesitation, Elijah confirmed. The professor turned to the board and analyzed what she had written. The silence became unbearable. Then, something unexpected happened. She realized he was right. Even so, she couldn't allow her authority to be questioned. "Come and correct it then," she said, handing him the marker. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing, Elijah walked to the board calmly, took the marker and without hesitation corrected the error. Each stroke on the board was firm, confident. No one could deny it. Dr. Richards stepped back, silent. The visiting professors exchanged incredulous looks. Dr. Whitaker, seated at the back of the room, adjusted his glasses to make sure of what he was seeing. "Correct," the professor finally said, with a slight tremor in her voice that few noticed. "Now please, return to your seat." Elijah returned to his desk, feeling the gazes of his classmates upon him, some admiring, others suspicious. Rachel Campbell, one of the few students who always treated him with respect, smiled at him. That small gesture meant more than any academic recognition, but that was just the beginning. In the following days, Elijah was enrolled without his knowledge in a mathematics competition organized by the university. He discovered that some professors had bet on whether he would win or not. More than a test of skill, it was a social experiment. Determined, Elijah accepted the challenge even knowing he was being used. At home in the modest apartment in the Brooklyn neighborhood that he shared with his mother, Mrs. Constance, Elijah didn't tell her about the incident or about the competition. Mrs. Constance, who worked as a nurse at the university hospital, already faced enough difficulties. Since Elijah's father had abandoned them years ago, when he learned of his son's syndrome, she had raised the boy alone, always believing in his potential when no one else did. "How was class today, son?" she asked, serving the simple but lovingly prepared dinner. "Normal," Elijah replied, looking away. He didn't want to worry her. Not yet. The next morning, Elijah found Rachel in the university courtyard. She was sitting on a bench, reading a book on mathematical analysis. "I was impressed yesterday," she said, closing the book as he approached. "Dr. Richards never admits mistakes," Elijah shrugged. "It was just an incorrect transformation. For you, maybe. For the rest of us mortals, those equations are a nightmare. Rachel hesitated. You know about the competition, don't you? Elijah nodded. Found out this morning. It seems I'm officially enrolled. You don't have to participate if you don't want to. It's clearly a trap. I know, he said, looking at the horizon where the Statue of Liberty stood out against the blue New York sky. But I'm going to participate anyway. Why? Because I'm not doing this for them. More than that, Elijah had solved the question in a way that even the experts hadn't considered. The auditorium exploded in applause. Dr. Richards, who had expected to see him fail, knew at that moment that she had made a gigantic error in underestimating him. Whitaker remained silent, unable to contest the truth before him. Elijah's victory was more than individual. It was a triumph against prejudices and limitations imposed by society. The news spread quickly through the university and soon reached the local newspapers. Student with Down syndrome wins mathematics competition at NYU was the headline the next day. In the following days, the university tried to claim credit, promoting Elijah as an example of inclusion despite having sabotaged him before. The president, Dr. Mendoza, organized a special ceremony to honor him, inviting the press and authorities. For her, it was a golden opportunity to show NYU as a progressive and inclusive institution. What the president didn't expect was Elijah's stance. When invited to speak, he was direct. I appreciate the recognition, but I can't help but notice the irony. The same institution that now celebrates me was the one that questioned me, tested me, and doubted me from the first day. True inclusion doesn't happen in ceremonies like this, but in classrooms, in hallways, in daily interactions. The silence that followed was deafening. The president, visibly uncomfortable, tried to regain control of the situation, but the damage was done. The cameras captured everything. Meanwhile, other students began to see Elijah as a symbol of strength, demanding changes in the academic environment. A group led by Rachel began organizing meetings and debates about accessibility and inclusion at the university. Dr. Richards, in a rare moment of humility, gathered the class and admitted, "Talent has no limit. Elijah Martin has proven that to us, and I, as an educator, have learned a valuable lesson." She looked directly at Elijah. "I apologize for not seeing your potential from the beginning." Dr. Whitaker, however, was a different case. His wounded pride wouldn't allow him to accept the new reality. In a department meeting, he expressed his concerns. "We're lowering our standards. One exceptional case doesn't change the statistics. The university should maintain its academic rigor." Professor Thompson didn't let it slide. "The only standard being questioned here, Richard, is your prejudice. Academic rigor was never at risk. On the contrary, Elijah raised the level." The discussion continued heatedly, reflecting deeper divisions in American society on issues of inclusion and diversity. Meanwhile, oblivious to these institutional battles, Elijah continued his studies. For him, mathematics was never a tool to prove his worth. It was his passion, his particular language. He didn't need anyone's validation. At home, Mrs. Constance observed the changes in her son with a mixture of pride and concern. "Don't let this change who you are, my son," she said one night as they were having dinner. "You've always been special, long before any competition or recognition." Elijah smiled. "I know, Mom, and it was you who always saw that in me when no one else did." At the university, the dynamic in classes had completely changed. Students who previously ignored Elijah now sought his help. Professors who had underestimated him now observed him with curiosity and, in some cases, admiration. Dr. Richards, in particular, began to notice other talents in him. Beyond the ability to solve complex problems, Elijah had a unique ability to explain difficult concepts in a simple and accessible way. After a particularly challenging class, she called him for a conversation. "Have you ever thought about tutoring, Mr. Martin? I think many students would benefit from your approach." Elijah considered the proposal. "I never thought about it. Do you really think I would be capable? After everything you've demonstrated?" "Yes, I believe you would be excellent." Thus was born the Integrative Study Group, an informal space where Elijah, with Rachel's support, began helping other students. What started as a small group in an empty classroom after hours soon grew, attracting students from different courses and even from other colleges. Elijah's method was unique. He didn't follow traditional teaching paths. Instead, he encouraged students to see problems from different angles, to seek unexpected connections between seemingly unrelated concepts. Mathematics is not a series of formulas to memorize, he would say. It's a language to describe the world. The fame of the group spread, even reaching the ears of the president. Dr. Mendoza saw another opportunity there. "We need to formalize this," she said to Dr. Richards. "An official tutoring program led by Elijah would be excellent for our institutional image." "With all due respect, President," Dr. Richards replied, "I believe the success of the group is precisely in its informality. Elijah has created an environment where students feel comfortable to explore without fear of judgment." But the president insisted, and soon posters appeared throughout the university announcing the Advanced Mathematics Mentoring Program, with Elijah's name highlighted. Cameras were installed to record the sessions, which now took place in a modern auditorium instead of the cozy room from before. The result was immediate. The number of participants increased dramatically, but the essence was lost. Elijah felt like a circus attraction, not an educator. Rachel noticed his unease. "This isn't what you wanted, is it?" she asked as they walked across campus after a particularly frustrating session. "No," he admitted. "It's become a spectacle. People come to see the guy with Down syndrome who's good at math, not to really learn." "Then let's change that," Rachel suggested, determined. "Let's go back to basics." Without prior notice, Elijah cancelled the next official session. Instead, he sent messages to the original members of the group, inviting them to a meeting at Central Park, a cultural space adjacent to the university. Far from the university's spotlight, under the shade of century-old oak trees, the group met. "No cameras, no pressure, no expectations," Elijah announced. "Just us and the numbers." The session was revitalizing. The students felt comfortable asking questions, making mistakes, exploring ideas without fear. Rachel observed, proud, how Elijah led the group with a perfect blend of rigor and empathy. The president, as expected, wasn't happy with the change. "This is insubordination," she declared in a meeting with Dr. Richards. "We used university resources to structure this program." "With all due respect, President," the professor replied, "Elijah isn't an employee of the university. He's a student and has every right to choose how to share his knowledge. He's using our platform, our reputation," the president insisted. "No, President. The university is trying to use his reputation, and perhaps that's the real insubordination." Meanwhile, Dr. Whitaker was facing his own crisis. Seeing Elijah's success, he began to question his own beliefs and prejudices. As a man of science, he couldn't ignore the evidence before his eyes. Elijah Martin wasn't just good at mathematics, despite his condition. He had a unique perspective, precisely because of it. In a surprising gesture, Whitaker showed up at one of the sessions in Central Park. He sat discreetly at the back, observing. Elijah noticed him, but continued the session normally. At the end, when the students began to disperse, Whitaker approached. "Mr. Martin," he began, visibly uncomfortable, "I came to observe your method. It's quite unconventional." "Just like me, Professor," Elijah replied with a slight smile. "Yes, well..." Whitaker hesitated. "I wanted to say that perhaps I have reassessed some of my positions." It wasn't exactly an apology, but for Whitaker it was a huge step. Elijah understood the effort and nodded. "Thank you for coming, Professor. You're always welcome." The news that Dr. Whitaker, known for his academic conservatism, had approved Elijah's method spread quickly. This, combined with the impressive results that students from the group began to achieve in exams and competitions, caught the attention of the national academic community. Invitations for lectures began to arrive. Universities from Boston, Chicago, San Francisco wanted Elijah to share his experience, but he declined most, preferring to focus on his studies and the group he had formed. You could be traveling the country, maybe even the world, Rachel commented as they studied together in the library. Why decline? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Because that's not what I want, he replied simply. I don't want to be a symbol or an inspiration. I just want to be Elijah, studying what I love, helping who I can. Rachel smiled, admiring his authenticity even more. What had begun as a study partnership had evolved into a deep friendship, and now something more. There was a moment of silence between them, filled with the unspoken. Elijah, she began hesitantly, have you ever thought about us, I mean beyond friends and study partners? Elijah looked at her, surprised. I thought you only saw me as a friend. At first, yes. But getting to know you, seeing your unique perspective on the world, your kindness, that changed. Elijah felt his heart racing. He had had feelings for Rachel for months, but never imagined they would be reciprocated. In his experience, people like him were rarely seen as potential romantic partners. I have feelings for you too, he finally admitted, but I'm afraid the world isn't kind to relationships like ours. Since when do we care what the world thinks? She replied, taking his hand over the table. We've faced prejudice together before. We can face more. While Elijah and Rachel explored this new dimension of their relationship, the university faced external pressures. The Department of Education had become aware of the case and showed interest in using Elijah's story as a model for national inclusion policies. The president saw this as an opportunity to repair her image after the previous misunderstandings. We need Elijah as the spokesperson for this initiative, she said to Dr. Richards. It will be beneficial for everyone, especially for him. Dr. Richards, who now knew her student better, was direct. I respect your vision, President, but I think you should ask Elijah what he wants. We've used him enough without his consent. When the proposal was presented to Elijah, he asked for time to think. He consulted his mother, Mrs. Constance, who had always been his wisest counselor. My son, she said, seated on the small balcony of their apartment from where you could see part of the Manhattan skyline in the distance. You don't owe anything to anyone. But think, how many children like you don't have the opportunities you had? How many families struggle alone as we struggled? Perhaps your voice can make a difference for them. Elijah reflected on his mother's words. He thought about his journey, the difficulties, the closed doors. He thought also about the joys, the discoveries, the doors he managed to open. And he thought about how many people still faced the same barriers he had faced. The next day, he sought out the president. I accept being part of this initiative, he said, but with one condition: I want autonomy to speak about the reality of inclusion, not just about success stories like mine. I want to talk about the challenges, the failures in the system, what still needs to be done. The president hesitated but eventually agreed. It was better to have Elijah as a critical ally than as an opponent. Thus began a new phase in Elijah Martin's life. Beyond his studies and the group he led, now he participated in political discussions about inclusion and education. His unique perspective, as a university student, as a person with Down syndrome, and as someone who had experienced both prejudice and recognition, brought a rare depth to these debates. Dr. Richards observed this evolution with admiration. Of all the professors, she was the one who changed her perspective the most. What began as skepticism transformed into respect, and eventually into an alliance. She began to include issues of accessibility and different learning styles in her teaching method, influenced by her experience with Elijah. Time passed and Elijah's last year at the university approached. He had decided to continue his academic training, seeking a master's degree in applied mathematics. His final thesis, on a new approach to solving partial differential equations, was already attracting attention from the scientific community. Rachel, now officially his girlfriend, planned to follow a similar path. Together, they dreamed of one day creating a research center dedicated not only to mathematics, but also to innovative methods of inclusive education. On a sunny afternoon, as they walked along Brighton Beach, Elijah made an unexpected proposal. What if we presented a joint project for the master's program, something that combined your expertise in analysis and mine in algebra? Rachel was enthusiastic about the idea. We could focus on practical applications, something that would really make a difference in people's lives. Exactly. Mathematics not as an end in itself, but as a tool to solve real problems. The project began to take shape, developing mathematical models to optimize accessibility in urban spaces. It was a theme that united both their passion for mathematics with a clear social purpose. They presented the proposal to the department, which received the project with enthusiasm. The news soon reached the president, who saw there another opportunity to promote the university's image. This could become an interdisciplinary program, she suggested during a meeting. Involve students from engineering, architecture, social sciences. For the first time, Elijah saw merit in the president's suggestion. The original idea was good, but expanded in this way, it could have an even greater impact. I agree, he said, surprising everyone. But it needs to be more than an academic project. We need to involve the community, listen to the people who really face accessibility barriers every day. The president hesitated. Involving the community meant opening the university's doors, exposing oneself to criticism, complications. But Elijah's determined look made her reconsider. All right, she finally agreed. Let's do this the right way. In the following weeks, the project gained unexpected dimensions. Students from various departments volunteered to participate. Community organizations were contacted. What began as an academic thesis was transforming into a movement. Meanwhile, Elijah faced a personal challenge. His mother, Mrs. Constance, was diagnosed with a heart condition that required intensive treatment. The medical consultations, tests, and medications were expensive, far beyond what her nurse's salary could cover. Elijah considered abandoning his studies to work full-time, but Mrs. Constance was firm. Don't even think about it, my son. I didn't. Fight so hard to see you give up now. We'll find a solution. It was Rachel who suggested an alternative. What if we applied for a special grant? Your project has potential for significant social impact. There are foundations that fund initiatives like this. The idea yielded results. An international foundation dedicated to inclusion and social innovation projects became interested in the proposal. After a rigorous selection process, Elijah and Rachel were awarded a grant that would not only allow them to continue their studies, but would also cover part of Mrs. Constance's medical expenses. Dr. Whitaker, who followed these developments from afar, felt compelled to act. In a surprising gesture, he offered part of his teaching hours to directly supervise the project. I believe I can contribute with my experience in mathematical modeling, he said, trying to sound casual, although everyone perceived the significance of that gesture. Dr. Richards couldn't hide her surprise. Well, Richard, it seems you've finally seen the light, she commented with a slight smile. Let's say I was illuminated by a different perspective, he replied, looking discreetly at Elijah. The project advanced, combining academic rigor with community engagement. Elijah and Rachel spent part of their time in the communities of Harlem and the South Bronx, areas of extreme inequality in New York, listening to the real needs of people with disabilities who lived there. These experiences informed the mathematical models they developed, making them more relevant and applicable. The president, initially uncomfortable with the exposure, began to see value in this approach. The university was truly fulfilling its social role, not just in theory but in practice. The community meetings, previously seen as a risk, were now highlighted in institutional reports as an example of innovative university outreach. It was during one of these community meetings that an unexpected incident occurred. A group of children from Harlem was invited to visit the university as part of the project. Among them was Lucas, a 9-year-old boy with autism, who showed a special fascination with mathematics, just like Elijah when he was young. During the visit, as the children explored the model of an accessible neighborhood that they had developed, Dr. Whitaker made an imprudent comment. It's interesting to see how special children connect with mathematical patterns. It's almost like a compensatory mechanism. Lucas, who was nearby, heard the comment. His countenance changed instantly. He moved away, clearly hurt, and hid under a table. Elijah, who observed everything, felt a wave of indignation. He approached Whitaker, and for the first time spoke firmly. "Professor, with all due respect, it's not a compensatory mechanism. It's just a different way of seeing the world, and comments like that are exactly the kind of barrier we're trying to eliminate." Whitaker turned pale, realizing his mistake. "I didn't mean... It was just a scientific observation." "Science without empathy is dangerous, Professor. You should know that better than anyone." Leaving Whitaker with his thoughts, Elijah approached Lucas. He crouched down to be at the boy's level and spoke softly. "Hey, Lucas. Is it okay if I join you under there?" Lucas hesitated but eventually nodded. Elijah settled beside him under the table. "You know," Elijah began, "when I was your age, I used to hide sometimes too. The world out there can be very noisy and confusing. Can't it?" Lucas looked at him, surprised to be understood. "Do you also see the numbers in things?" he asked timidly. "Yes," smiled Elijah. "I see patterns where others see only chaos. It's like a secret language, isn't it?" Lucas's eyes lit up. "No one ever understands when I talk about that." "I understand," Elijah assured him, "and I want you to know that it's not a defect. It's a gift, a different and special way of seeing the world." Gradually, Lucas came out of his hiding place. The conversation between him and Elijah continued, now focused on the mathematical patterns that both adored. The other children, curious, joined them. Soon, what started as a moment of crisis transformed into an improvised and exciting math lesson on the laboratory floor. Dr. Whitaker observed from a distance, deeply impacted. He saw how Elijah, with no apparent effort, created an inclusive environment where all children, with or without disabilities, participated actively. He saw how Lucas, previously withdrawn, now enthusiastically explained a geometric pattern to a colleague. And he saw finally what Elijah had been trying to show from the beginning, that inclusion wasn't about making concessions, but about recognizing and valuing different ways of existing and learning. After the visit, Whitaker sought out Elijah. "Mr. Martin," he began, visibly uncomfortable, "I want to apologize for my comment. It was inappropriate and reflects an outdated thinking that, apparently, I still haven't completely abandoned." Elijah nodded, accepting the apology. "Change is a process, Professor. We're all learning." "What you did with that boy," continued Whitaker, "was extraordinary. You understood him in a way that I, with all my years of academic experience, couldn't." "Because I've been in his place," Elijah explained simply. "You don't need to have Down syndrome to understand the pain of being excluded, just empathy." That incident marked a turning point in the project. Dr. Whitaker, touched by the experience, became an unexpected advocate for the cause. He began to review his own teaching method, seeking ways to make it more inclusive. Dr. Richards, already aligned with the cause, joined forces with him to propose broader curricular changes in the department. The president, seeing the potential for positive impact, decided to take the proposal to the university board. What began as a project of 2 students can become an institutional policy, she argued. A true revolution in how we think about and practice inclusive education. The university board, historically conservative, initially showed reluctance. Issues of budget, practicality, and maintaining academic rigor were raised as obstacles, but the president was prepared. With data from the pilot project, she demonstrated that inclusion, when done seriously and not as a mere formality, benefited everyone. Students with disabilities gained real opportunities, while others developed empathy and creativity in a more diverse environment. To everyone's surprise, Dr. Whitaker asked to speak during the meeting. "Gentlemen," he began, looking at the conservative colleagues who would have previously found an ally in him, "I was the biggest skeptic of this project. I believed we were sacrificing excellence in the name of an ideology, but the data doesn't lie. The results are before us, and more importantly, I witnessed with my own eyes the impact. This isn't ideology, it's science, it's humanity, and if we as an educational institution aren't willing to learn and evolve, then we've failed in our most fundamental mission." Whitaker's unexpected speech turned the tide. The board, still with some reservations, approved the creation of a Center for Studies in Inclusive Education at NYU, with Elijah and Rachel as founding researchers under the joint supervision of Dr. Richards and Dr. Whitaker. The news spread quickly through the national academic community. Other universities began to show interest in replicating the model. The Department of Education invited Elijah to participate in an advisory committee on inclusion policies in higher education. For Elijah, however, the greatest achievement wasn't in the official recognitions, but in the small daily impacts. Like when Lucas, the boy he had met during the visit, started attending Saturday math workshops at the university. Or when students with different disabilities sought out the university, inspired by his story, no longer fearing rejection. At home, Mrs. Constance, whose health had improved significantly thanks to adequate treatment, observed her son with a pride she could barely contain. "Your father should see you now," she said one day, with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. "Perhaps he would understand the mistake he made in abandoning us." Elijah hugged his mother. "He lost the chance to know me, Mum, but so many other people gained that opportunity. I'm at peace with it." Rachel, who was present, felt her eyes well up. Elijah's ability to transform pain into compassion, rejection into inclusion, was one of the many reasons why she loved him deeply. Time passed, and the project continued to grow. The Center for Studies in Inclusive Education became a national reference. Elijah completed his master's with distinction and began his doctorate with an even more ambitious thesis, developing algorithms that would adapt the teaching of mathematics to different forms of learning. On a sunny morning, while working on his computer in the small room he shared with other doctoral students, Elijah received surprising news. He had been selected as a finalist for the National Prize for Innovation in Education, one of the most prestigious academic honors in the country. The ceremony would be held in Washington, D.C., with the presence of national and international authorities. Elijah initially hesitated. He never sought public recognition and felt uncomfortable with the attention. But Rachel convinced him, "It's not for you, Elijah. It's for what you represent." How many children with Down syndrome will see one of their own being recognized at the highest level? Imagine the impact. Convinced, Elijah accepted the invitation. Mrs. Constance insisted on buying a new suit for him, saving for months for it. Rachel helped him prepare a speech in case he won. The night of the ceremony arrived. The Kennedy Center in Washington was filled with academics, politicians, and opinion makers. Elijah, seated between Rachel and his mother, felt his heart beating hard. When his name was announced as the winner, the audience erupted in applause. Ascending to the stage, Elijah faced the sea of faces. He adjusted the microphone and, with a clear and firm voice, began, "I thank you for this recognition, which I don't see as personal, but as a symbol of change. When I was born, the doctor told my mother that I would never attend a regular school. When I entered the university, I heard that it was a mistake, a concession, an experiment, doomed to failure. Today, I stand before you, not as an exceptional case, but as proof that our limitations are most of the time imposed from the outside in." He paused, looking directly at the cameras broadcasting the event. "To every child with a disability watching now, you belong, you are capable, and the world needs the unique perspective that only you can offer. To every father and mother who received a diagnosis and felt fear, there is hope, there are possibilities. There is a future full of achievements waiting for your children." Turning to the authorities present, he continued, "And to the decision-makers here present, inclusion is not charity. It's justice. It's not a favor. It's a right. And when done correctly, it benefits everyone. We can no longer accept that talents are wasted and potentials are limited because our society still hasn't learned to value neurodiversity." The audience, visibly moved, gave him a standing ovation as he concluded, "This award doesn't mark the end of a journey, but the beginning of another. There's still much to be done, and with the collaboration of all academia, government, civil society, we can build a truly inclusive America where each person, regardless of their characteristics, can realize their full potential." Upon returning to his seat, Elijah was surprised by an elderly man who approached timidly. It was the doctor who, 25 years earlier, had told Mrs. Constance that her son would never have a normal academic life. "Mr. Martin," he said with a choked voice, I was wrong, and I've never been so happy to be wrong in my life." Elijah smiled and extended his hand. "It's not about being right or wrong, doctor. It's about being willing to change when the evidence indicates so." After the ceremony at the hotel, Elijah reflected on the irony of his journey. The same system that excluded him now celebrated him. The same experts who doubted his potential now cited him as an example. There was a powerful lesson there about resistance, about transformation, about the power of a single person to change an entire system from the inside out. Rachel joined him on the balcony, contemplating the Washington horizon. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, encircling his waist. "About how we got here," he replied. "About how what began with a simple corrected mathematical error in a class transformed into all this." "It wasn't the error," she gently corrected. "It was your courage in pointing it out. It was your refusal to be less than who you are." Elijah smiled. "And it was you believing in me when few did." That night, under the starry sky of the American Capitol, Elijah Martin made a promise to himself. He would continue fighting not just for his own trajectory, but for all those who, like him, faced seemingly insurmountable barriers. Because he had learned that the most difficult limitations to overcome weren't those that come from within, but those imposed by a society still trapped in prejudices and stereotypes. Upon returning to New York, a surprise awaited him. Dr. Whitaker, who had become an unlikely ally, announced his retirement from the university, and in his last official act, he recommended Elijah for a position as an assistant professor in the department, something unprecedented for someone still in the doctoral program. "Mr. Martin has demonstrated not only an exceptional mastery of the content," Whitaker wrote in his recommendation, "but also a unique ability to communicate it in innovative and accessible ways. His differentiated perspective is exactly what our department needs to evolve." The proposal generated controversy in the board as expected. Some argued it was too soon, that the traditional protocol required the completion of the doctorate. Others, however, pointed to the concrete results already achieved by the Center for Studies in Inclusive Education under his leadership. Dr. Richards, now head of the department, presented the final argument. "If we truly want to become an inclusive institution, we need to be willing to adapt our traditional structures and procedures. Elijah Martin is not only qualified for this position, he brings a perspective that no other member of our faculty possesses." The approval came by a narrow margin, but it came. Elijah Martin became the first assistant professor with Down syndrome in the history of the university, possibly the country. The news reverberated nationally, generating heated debates about inclusion, meritocracy, and the role of educational institutions. In his first class as a professor, Elijah faced a packed auditorium. Students from various departments, journalists, and curious onlookers crowded to witness the historic moment. He felt the weight of that responsibility, but also the determination to honor it. He began his class with a simple question: "What is mathematics to you?" The answers came quickly. A set of rules, the language of the universe, a tool to solve problems. Elijah listened to each answer attentively before offering his own. "For me, mathematics is freedom. It's the proof that, regardless of who we are or how our brains function, we can find universal truths. It's a field where what matters isn't who you are, but what you can prove." And so, with this declaration of principles, a new chapter began in Elijah Martin's life and in the history of New York University. A chapter of transformation, not just individual but institutional. A chapter that proved, day after day, that inclusion wasn't just a policy or a discourse, but a living practice in constant evolution. Elijah's story inspired others. Students with various disabilities who previously wouldn't even consider higher education now saw that it was possible. Parents of children with Down syndrome began to dream bigger for their children, and slowly other universities began to rethink their own policies and practices. On a particularly significant morning, Elijah received an unexpected visit in his office. Lucas, that same boy with autism he had met years ago, now a 16-year-old teenager. By his side, his mother, visibly emotional. "Lucas has just been accepted to NYU's mathematics program," she announced with tears in her eyes. "He said he just wanted to be here, with you, when he received the news." Lucas, with the characteristic enthusiasm of his age, added, "I want to be like you, Professor Elijah. I want to show that people like us can make a difference." Elijah felt a wave of emotion. He saw in that young man a reflection of himself, years ago. He saw the cycle completing itself. He saw the true meaning of his work, not just opening doors for himself, but keeping them open for those who would come after. "Lucas," he said with a choked voice, "you don't need to be like me. You just need to be yourself, with all the brilliant uniqueness that implies, and that's already extraordinary." That night, heading home with Rachel, now his wife, Elijah reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From looks of doubt to applause, from closed doors to opportunities, from those who doubted to those who believed. It was a story of transformation, not just his own, but of an entire environment, an entire mentality. And as the sun set over the Manhattan skyline, painting the New York sky with shades of orange and pink, Elijah Martin knew he was exactly where he should be, doing exactly what he should do. Not as an exception or a symbol, but as an educator, a researcher, a human being full in his capabilities and potentialities. In his apartment, still modest, but now located closer to the university, Mrs. Constance awaited her son and daughter-in-law for dinner. On the table, a special cake. It had been exactly 10 years since that fateful day in Dr. Richards' class, when a young student with Down syndrome dared to correct a feared professor. "To courage," Rachel toasted, raising her glass. "To perseverance," added Mrs. Constance. "To transformation," concluded Elijah, "not just our own, but of an entire system that slowly learns to value diversity not as an obstacle, but as a strength." And as they shared stories and laughter under the soft light of the dining room, a certainty hung in the air. True inclusion isn't measured by laws or policies, but by transformed lives, by opened doors, by realized potentials. And in this sense, Elijah Martin's journey was just the beginning of a silent but profound revolution in the American educational system. The end of the story. Dear listener, what did you think of Elijah's story? Have you ever witnessed or experienced situations of prejudice in educational environments? Do you believe our society is evolving on the issue of inclusion? Share your opinion in the comments. This narrative makes us reflect on how we judge people based only on appearances or conditions, without knowing their true potential. Don't forget to leave your like and especially to subscribe to the channel to follow more inspiring stories like this one. Your company and feedback are fundamental for us to continue bringing content that moves and makes you think.